The Apache woman bought the captive cowboy. That night she said to him, "You will be my husband." Wooden buildings lined a dusty main street, and the sound of horses' hooves echoed against the walls of the few shops that opened early. Men were already tending to their horses, women were carrying water from the nearby well, and children ran barefoot along the dirt paths, chasing each other in laughter that seemed almost too light for the harshness of the land. Far from the town, in the open desert, a group of Apache warriors rode silently. Among them was a woman, not just any warrior, but a figure of strength and determination. She was known among her people for her sharp mind, her skill in hunting, and her courage in defending her tribe. Her dark hair was braided tightly against her head, her eyes sharp and alert. She rode with the grace of someone completely at home in the desert, moving like a shadow over the rocks and sand. The woman and her small group had been scouting the area near the town for days. They watched quietly from the cliffs above, noting the movements of settlers, listening to the distant sounds of work and conversation. They were not there to harm anyone without reason. Survival was the priority. Yet, in the midst of this routine observation, their eyes fell on a young cowboy working alone on a small ranch just outside the town. The cowboy was tall and lean, with the sun-browned skin of someone who had spent years outdoors. His clothes were worn but clean, and he moved with a confidence born of experience. He was mending a fence, hammering nails with strong, steady arms, completely unaware of the eyes watching him from the hills above. The Apache woman studied him for a moment, sensing something unusual about him. There was strength in his movements, a kind of quiet determination, and perhaps even intelligence behind his cautious glances around the land. When the decision was made to approach, it was done with careful planning. The woman's group descended silently, moving through the desert like whispers of wind. By the time the cowboy noticed them, it was too late to escape. The sudden appearance of the riders startled him, and instinct took over. He tried to run toward the safety of his ranch, but the desert terrain was unfamiliar, and the woman's horse was faster, more agile over the rocks and sand. Within moments, he was surrounded. Fear flashed in the cowboy's eyes, but he did not panic entirely. He was a man used to facing danger, and his mind worked quickly. Yet, despite his best efforts, he could not find a way out. The Apache woman, noticing his struggle, gave a signal to her group, and he was gently but firmly restrained. There was no cruelty in her movements, only control and authority. She looked at him, her eyes narrowing slightly, trying to gauge his character. He was strong, yes, but he was also alive, alert, curious, and unafraid of the unknown. The other warriors discussed in low whispers what to do. Some suggested keeping him as a prisoner, others argued for a quick release. The woman listened, considering their words, but her mind was made up. This man was different. There was something about him that stood apart from the usual travelers or settlers they sometimes encountered. She decided to purchase him from the leader of the group. Not with money as the settlers would know it, but with items of value to the tribe, beads, cloth, tools, and supplies that could help her people survive. The transaction was simple yet meaningful. The leader nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in her decision, and the cowboy, confused and wary, was told that he now belonged to her. His initial reaction was disbelief. He could not understand why this woman, a fierce warrior, would choose him in such a manner. Was it a test? A trap? Or perhaps something more? His mind raced with questions, but there was no immediate answer. The woman's expression remained calm, almost unreadable, yet there was a hint of curiosity, as if she wanted to discover something about him that even he did not know himself. As the group began the journey back to their camp, the cowboy was given a chance to walk beside the woman's horse. He moved cautiously, aware of the delicate balance of trust and power that surrounded him. Every step in the desert reminded him of his vulnerability, but also of the strange possibility that he might learn something new, something beyond the world he had known. The woman rode ahead, her posture upright and confident, occasionally glancing back at him with a steady gaze that was both challenging and protective. The journey was long, the sun climbing higher and hotter in the sky. The cowboy's muscles ached from walking, and the dust clung to his clothes and skin. Yet the woman did not speak much, only occasionally giving him instructions or guidance on how to move through the terrain. Her silence was not unkind. It was a way of teaching him patience, endurance, and observation, skills he would need if he hoped to survive in this new reality. Along the way, they encountered signs of the desert's harshness, a dried-up riverbed, the tracks of predators, and the remnants of other travelers who had not been as fortunate. The woman pointed out small details, teaching the cowboy to read the land. Each lesson, though simple, carried meaning beyond survival. She was showing him how to think, how to anticipate, how to respect the world around him. Slowly, he began to understand that this was not a random act of captivity, but a deliberate introduction to a way of life he had never known. As the evening approached, the camp came into view. Small fires flickered against the dimming light, and the sounds of the tribe, children laughing, elders speaking softly, the rhythm of daily life, welcomed them. The cowboy felt a mix of awe and fear. Everything was different from the world he knew, the people, the customs, the pace of life. Yet there was a sense of order, of balance that he could not ignore. The woman dismounted and helped him with his own adjustments, showing him the space where he would rest and eat. That night, as the desert grew cold and the stars illuminated the sky like scattered diamonds, the cowboy sat quietly by the fire. The woman approached him, her presence commanding yet not intimidating. She did not speak immediately, allowing him to settle into the reality of his new situation. Then, in a calm, deliberate voice, she said, "You will be mine tonight, but not as a prisoner. You will learn, you will understand, and perhaps one day you will see why this was necessary." There was authority, yes, but also a strange kindness, a certainty that he could neither resist nor fully comprehend. He wanted to question her, to argue, to find a way back to the life he had known, but something in her gaze held him still. It was not fear, it was recognition of a challenge he had never faced. The cowboy spent that night thinking about everything he had experienced: the capture, the journey, the camp, the woman who had taken control of his fate. He realized that his life had changed in ways he could not yet measure. He was no longer simply a man surviving on his own terms. He was part of a story much larger than himself, a story of people, culture, and survival in a harsh, unforgiving land. By the time the sun rose again over the desert, he had begun to accept his new reality. The woman, watching from a short distance, noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor. He was still cautious, still wary, but there was a spark of understanding forming, a recognition that perhaps this experience was not just about captivity, but about growth, endurance, and a chance to see the world through a perspective he had never imagined. The first part of the cowboy's journey had ended, but the true story was only beginning. The desert was vast, the tribe's world complex, and the woman's presence a constant reminder that life could take unexpected turns. In the quiet of that morning, as the wind whispered through the canyon, both the cowboy and the Apache woman understood that this was more than a simple encounter. It was the start of a relationship that would test courage, patience, and the boundaries of trust and respect. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert, painting the horizon with shades of gold and orange. The cowboy awoke to the sounds of the Apache camp stirring around him, children laughing as they ran between tents, elders speaking softly in their language, and the rhythmic beat of drums in the distance. Everything was unfamiliar, yet there was a strange sense of harmony to it. He could feel the pulse of life in the camp, a rhythm he had never known in the hurried, often chaotic towns he had traveled through before. The Apache woman approached him with a calm, steady presence, carrying a small bundle of food. She had watched him through the night, noticing the careful way he had listened to the whispers of the wind, the subtle way he had scanned the camp, taking everything in. She handed him a piece of flatbread wrapped in cloth and gestured for him to eat. "Eat slowly," she said, Her voice was firm but not harsh. "You will need strength today." He had survived harsh lands, dangerous rivers, and wild animals, but this situation was different. He was surrounded by people who could have been his enemies, yet they had treated him with a measure of caution rather than cruelty. He took a bite of the bread and felt the warmth of the fire on his hands. The taste was simple but satisfying, and he realized that even in this strange environment, basic needs could bring comfort. The woman led him around the camp, showing him the small tasks that kept their community alive. Children were taught to gather water from a nearby stream, to recognize edible plants, and to respect the animals around them. The elders told stories of past generations, of struggles and triumphs, of survival and wisdom. The cowboy listened carefully, feeling both out of place and strangely intrigued. He had always been used to taking life step by step, with little thought for tradition or the past, but here, history and memory were woven into every action. "You must learn to observe," the woman said, stopping near a small fire where others were preparing meals. "Everything has meaning. Every sound, every movement, every shadow can teach you something." Could he adapt to this new life, or would he forever remain an outsider? The days that followed were filled with work, lessons, and observation. The cowboy learned to track small animals across the desert, following footprints and broken twigs, noticing subtle signs of movement that would have gone unnoticed in the towns he had known. The woman taught him how to hunt with patience and precision, using a bow and arrow instead of relying solely on the gun he had carried for years. At first he struggled, missing targets and feeling frustrated, but she encouraged him, showing him that skill came with patience, not force. "You cannot force the world to obey you," she said one afternoon as the sun beat down upon them. "You must move with it, understand it, respect it." He started to notice patterns in the wind, in the tracks of animals, even in the movement of the sun and shadows. Each lesson made him more aware of his surroundings and slowly more confident in himself. But life in the camp was not just about survival. It was also about trust, respect, and understanding. The woman observed him constantly, watching not just his actions but his reactions. She tested him with small challenges, asking him to carry water across difficult terrain, to help with the younger children, or to solve problems in ways he had never considered. Each test was a small window into his character, and she was careful to push him without breaking him. At first, the cowboy resented these lessons. He felt trapped, frustrated, and unsure of why she had chosen him. Yet over time, his resentment began to fade. He saw that the woman did not want to harm him. She wanted him to grow, to adapt, to see the world in a new way. Slowly, he began to respect her strength and wisdom, realizing that she was unlike anyone he had ever met. She was firm without being cruel, demanding without being harsh, and her presence carried a sense of calm authority that made him pause and think before acting. One evening, as the sky turned pink and purple with the setting sun, the woman invited him to sit with her outside the camp. They watched the desert stretch endlessly before them, the wind moving gently across the sand and rocks. "You are learning," she said quietly, almost as if speaking to herself. "But learning is only the first step. Understanding comes later. Understanding yourself." He could track animals with a sharper eye, hunt with greater accuracy, and move silently across the desert without leaving obvious signs of his passage. He began to participate more in the camp's daily routines, helping to carry supplies, cook meals, and even teach some of the younger children how to ride and care for horses. He felt a growing connection to the people around him, a sense that he was becoming part of something larger than himself. At the same time, his relationship with the Apache woman evolved. They spoke less formally now, sharing small stories of their pasts and exchanging observations about the land and life. She taught him not just survival skills but the values of her people: honor, courage, and respect for nature and community. He began to admire her in ways he had never expected, not only for her skill and bravery, but also for her intelligence, patience, and quiet determination. One morning, after a long night of rain had soaked the desert, the woman challenged him to follow a set of tracks leading deep into the hills. The task was difficult, requiring not just skill but intuition and observation. The cowboy hesitated, unsure if he was ready, but she gave him a firm nod. "Trust yourself," she said. "You already know more than you think." When he finally returned to the camp, having successfully tracked the animal she had set for him, she nodded approvingly. "You are learning," she said, "and learning brings respect. Respect brings understanding." He was no longer the same man who had been captured weeks ago. He had begun to see the world through new eyes, to value patience, observation, and the strength that came from connection rather than domination. Despite the growing respect and understanding, there were moments of tension. The cowboy sometimes felt frustration, missing the freedom of his old life. He wondered if he would ever truly belong in this world, or if he would always remain a visitor, an outsider looking in. The woman, noticing his moments of doubt, would offer guidance, sometimes through quiet conversation, other times through a challenge or task designed to help him see the value of his new life. One night, as the desert stars sparkled above them, the cowboy and the woman sat together by a fire. The wind was calm, carrying the faint scent of sage and burning wood. They shared stories of their pasts, the towns he had traveled through, the family he had left behind, the challenges she had faced growing up in the desert. In these quiet moments, they began to understand each other not just as teacher and student or captor and captive, but as two people navigating a world that was larger and more complex than either had imagined. "You are changing," she said quietly, "and so am I, in ways I did not expect." He knew that his journey was far from over, that the lessons were only beginning, and that the connection between them was something he would have to navigate carefully. Yet, for the first time, he felt a sense of peace in the desert, a feeling that he could survive here, not just in body but in spirit. As the night deepened, he understood something important. Life in the Apache camp was not about imprisonment or control. It was about learning, understanding, and becoming part of a community that valued strength, courage, and respect. And through it all, the woman, fierce, intelligent, and unyielding, was guiding him, challenging him, and showing him a path he had never imagined. By the time the first light of dawn touched the desert hills, the cowboy had grown more confident, more aware, and more connected to the people around him. He was no longer simply a man caught by circumstance. He was a student of life in a world that demanded patience, skill, and courage. And he began to realize that the woman who had brought him here, who had purchased him, taught him, and guided him, was becoming more than just a teacher or a captor. She was someone he could respect, perhaps even trust, in ways he had never expected. The desert was quiet that evening, with the sun sinking low behind the distant hills, turning the sky into a palette of deep orange, purple, and gold. The camp was alive with the usual sounds of life, children playing, elders speaking softly, and the occasional laughter of young women as they tended to daily chores. But beneath the calm, there was a tension in the air that the cowboy could feel. The wind whispered differently, carrying a faint, distant sound that made the hair on his neck stand up. He was sitting near the fire, sharpening a small knife the woman had given him weeks ago. His hands moved carefully, methodically, but his mind was alert, listening to every sound around the camp. The woman approached quietly, her presence commanding yet gentle, and sat beside him. She did not speak immediately. Instead, she scanned the horizon, her sharp eyes picking up details that the cowboy could not see, the way the shadows shifted, the subtle marks in the sand, the distant outline of approaching figures. "They are coming," she said finally, her voice low but firm. "Watch carefully. Do not panic, but prepare yourself." Despite the lessons he had learned, despite the respect he now held for the woman and the tribe, fear still ran through him. He had faced danger before, storms, wild animals, even bandits, but this was different. These were humans, armed and deliberate, and they had eyes set on the camp. The woman stood, signaling the warriors around her. Men and women moved quickly, silently, taking positions around the perimeter of the camp. The cowboy was told to stay close, to follow instructions, and to observe. His pulse raced, but he forced himself to stay calm. He knew that panic would only endanger him and the people he had come to respect. As the figures approached, it became clear that they were not ordinary travelers. Their movements were calculated, aggressive, and intent on confrontation. The cowboy felt a mixture of fear and admiration as he watched the woman coordinate the defense of her people. She moved with authority, issuing clear commands, and the warriors responded without hesitation. He realized that she was not just a teacher or a guide, she was a leader, a protector, someone whose courage and intelligence could turn the tide of danger. The first clash occurred at the edge of the camp, where a group of the intruders attempted to breach the defenses. The cowboy instinctively reached for his own weapon, a small pistol he had kept hidden, but the woman stopped him with a calm gesture. "Observe first," she commanded. "Act only when necessary." The battle was brief but intense, with shouts, the clatter of weapons, and the movement of bodies across the sand. The cowboy felt a rush of adrenaline, a mixture of fear, excitement, and awe at the skill and bravery displayed before him. When the dust settled, the intruders had been driven back, retreating into the desert with a few wounded but no fatalities among the Apache. The cowboy could hardly believe it. The camp was safe, thanks to the leadership of the woman and the bravery of the people he had come to respect. His hands were still shaking, but there was a new understanding in his eyes, a recognition that courage, strategy, and unity could overcome almost any threat. After the confrontation, the woman approached him. Her expression was serious, but there was a softness in her eyes that he had not seen before. "You acted well," she said. "You did not panic and you followed instructions. That is important. That is strength." He looked at her, searching for what she truly meant, but her face remained calm, composed, unreadable. That night, as the camp settled into quiet after the battle, the woman led the cowboy to a small clearing near the edge of the desert. The sky was filled with stars, more than he had ever seen in a town or city. The air was cool, carrying the scent of sand, sage, and smoke from the dying campfires. He could hear the faint murmur of the tribe in the distance, but here, in this small clearing, it was just the two of them. She turned to him, her eyes meeting his directly. "Tonight," she said, her voice steady, "you will understand something important. You will understand why you are here, why you were brought to this place, and why I chose you. You must also understand the heart of our people, the bonds that hold us together, and the strength it takes to protect what we love." He had felt the strength of the tribe, but now he began to realize that there was something deeper, something personal in the woman's intentions. Then she said the words that would change everything. "You will be my husband." He had known that a bond was forming between them, had felt respect and perhaps even admiration, but he had never imagined this. His mind struggled to process the sudden shift in reality. How could this be? He was a stranger in her world, a captive only a short time ago, and yet she spoke with certainty, as if there had never been any doubt. The woman did not waver, her gaze steady and unflinching. "You do not need to answer me tonight," she said. "But you must understand that this is not a command. It is an offer, a choice that will test your courage, your respect, and your understanding of who we are." He had come to respect her, to trust her guidance, but this step was unlike any he had faced before. It required not just bravery in battle or skill in the desert, but courage of the heart. They spent the rest of the night speaking quietly, sharing thoughts and experiences, each word carrying meaning beyond its surface. The woman told him stories of her past, of the challenges she had faced growing up in the desert, of the responsibilities she bore as a protector of her people. The cowboy shared parts of his life too, though carefully, revealing only what felt safe and true. Through their conversation, a deeper understanding began to form, a recognition that they were no longer simply teacher and student, captor and captive, but two people connected by respect, trust, and an emerging bond that neither had fully anticipated. As the night grew darker, the wind moving gently across the sand, the cowboy realized something important. He was no longer thinking of escape, no longer resisting the life he had been thrust into. Instead, he was considering the possibility of belonging, of becoming part of a world he had once thought foreign and frightening. The woman had not only guided him in survival, but had shown him the meaning of courage, loyalty, and connection. By dawn, the camp was quiet again, with the first rays of sunlight illuminating the tents and fires. The cowboy had slept little, but he felt a strange calmness, a sense of readiness for whatever the day might bring. The woman approached him once more, her expression soft but firm. "You will have time," she said. "Time to understand, to decide, and to prepare for what is to come. But know this, courage is not just in facing danger. It is in facing yourself and in choosing what is right for you and those you care for." And he realized that in this challenge, there was an opportunity for growth, for understanding, and perhaps for a connection that was deeper than anything he had known. As the camp stirred to life, the cowboy watched the woman move among her people with confidence and grace. He saw how deeply she was respected, how her decisions shaped the lives of those around her, and how her strength was tempered by compassion and wisdom. He knew that accepting her offer, whatever that might mean, would not be simple. It would require patience, courage, and an openness to change. Yet for the first time he felt that he was ready to meet that challenge, not as a captive, but as someone willing to understand, learn, and perhaps even belong. The turning point had arrived. The cowboy's life had changed forever, and the path ahead was uncertain, filled with both danger and promise. He had faced the desert, the threat of intruders, and the trials of learning a new way of life. Now he faced a challenge more personal, more profound, and more demanding than any he had encountered. The chance to step into a bond that required trust, courage, and an open heart. And so, as the sun rose higher over the desert hills, the cowboy took his first true steps toward understanding not only the world around him, but the woman who had chosen him, and the possibility of a life that was no longer defined by fear, but by courage, respect, and perhaps love. The morning sun spread slowly across the desert, warming the earth with a gentle touch. The camp was stirring with life. Children laughed as they chased one another near the tents, elders moved with quiet purpose, and the soft clatter of tools and cooking filled the air. Yet there was a sense of anticipation, subtle but undeniable, that rippled through the camp. Something had changed. The cowboy, once uncertain and wary, now walked with a cautious confidence. He had faced danger, learned the ways of the tribe, and endured tests of skill, patience, and courage. But today was different. Today, he was asked to face a test of the heart. The Apache woman approached him with her usual calm authority. She had been watching him for days, noticing the way he moved among the people, the careful way he spoke, the respect he showed for the tribe's customs. She could see the transformation in him, the shift from fear and resistance to understanding and strength. Today, she knew, he would need to confront not just his own feelings, but the possibility of a future he had never imagined. "You have grown," she said quietly, standing beside him. Her dark eyes held a mixture of seriousness and warmth. "You understand our ways, our land, and our people. Now you must understand what it means to belong, not just as a guest, but as someone who shares our life." He realized that the woman's challenge was not about authority or control, but about choice, trust, and connection. They walked together through the camp, past the children playing near the small stream, past the elders tending to gardens, past the horses grazing quietly in the open space. The cowboy noticed how every person moved with purpose, how the tribe functioned as a community, and how the woman's guidance shaped everything around her. He began to see himself not as an outsider, but as someone who could contribute, someone who could belong. As the day went on, they prepared for a ceremony that the woman had planned, not a formal ritual but a quiet, meaningful act to mark the bond she had offered him. The cowboy helped gather small items for the ceremony, arranging stones, kindling, and simple cloths in a careful, deliberate way. The woman watched him, nodding with approval. "Attention to detail shows respect," she said. "Respect shows understanding. Understanding shows the heart." Here, at this moment, they would confront the truth of their bond. The woman turned to him, her expression calm but unwavering. "You have learned much," she said. "You have shown courage, respect, and patience. And now you must choose. Will you accept the life I offer, not as a captive but as a partner, a part of this tribe and a part of me?" He had come to respect her strength and wisdom, and a bond had formed between them, subtle at first but undeniable. Now, faced with her direct question, he realized that he had reached a point where his heart could no longer deny the truth. He looked into her eyes, seeing the depth of her courage, the clarity of her intention, and the warmth that had always been there beneath her firmness. "I will," he said finally, his voice steady but quiet. "I will stay, not because I must, but because I want to. I want to learn to belong and to share this life with you." The cowboy felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of belonging he had never known before. The tribe gathered quietly around them, observing with respect and curiosity. The elders nodded, the children watched with fascination, and the warriors stood nearby, acknowledging the union without ceremony but with deep approval. It was a quiet moment, yet it carried profound meaning. The cowboy was no longer a stranger, no longer a captive. He was part of the tribe, part of a life that valued courage, respect, and connection above all else. Over the following days, life in the camp settled into a new rhythm. The cowboy continued his daily work, hunting, tending to animals, helping with tasks, but now with a deeper purpose. He understood that his actions mattered not just to himself, but to the people around him. He learned to move with patience, to observe with care, and to act with consideration. The woman remained his guide, partner, and friend, but their relationship had evolved into one of mutual respect and shared responsibility. Evenings were spent in conversation, sharing stories of the past and dreams of the future. The cowboy told tales of towns he had visited, of rivers he had crossed, and of lessons learned on his own. The woman shared stories of her childhood, of the challenges of growing up in the desert, and of the values that had shaped her. Through these exchanges, they came to understand each other more fully, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. One night, as the camp slept under a sky filled with stars, the cowboy and the woman sat together by a fire. The wind moved gently, carrying the scent of the desert and the warmth of the flames. They spoke quietly, not needing many words, their connection evident in the shared silence and the occasional glance. The cowboy realized that this bond was not built on obligation or power, but on respect, trust, and the willingness to see the world through another's eyes. "You have changed," the woman said softly, breaking the silence. "You are stronger, wiser, and more patient. But most of all, you have learned to see the heart, not just the body or the skill. That is the greatest lesson of all." Days turned into weeks, and the cowboy became fully integrated into the tribe. He was accepted not just by the woman, but by the elders, the warriors, and the children. He learned to hunt with skill, care for the animals, and participate in daily life with purpose. He observed, listened, and acted with the wisdom he had gained under the woman's guidance. Every day he felt more at home, more connected, and more certain that he had found a place where he belonged. The woman watched him with quiet pride, recognizing the growth he had achieved. She saw the way he moved with confidence, how he interacted with the people, and how he approached challenges with a thoughtful mind. She knew that the bond they shared was not just built on words or actions, but on mutual respect, trust, and understanding. One evening, they walked together to a high cliff overlooking the desert. The sun was setting, painting the sky in vibrant shades of orange, pink, and purple. The cowboy looked out over the vast expanse, feeling a sense of peace he had never known. He realized that his journey had taken him from fear and uncertainty to courage, understanding, and love. The woman stood beside him, her hand brushing lightly against his. "This is your home now," she said. "Not just the land, but the people, the life, and the bond we share. You have chosen this, and in choosing you have found strength." As the stars began to appear, shimmering in the night sky, the cowboy and the woman returned to the camp. The tribe welcomed them with quiet acknowledgement, the daily routines continuing with a sense of harmony and connection. Life was not always easy, but it was full of meaning, purpose, and shared strength. The cowboy had discovered that courage was not only in facing danger, but in choosing to belong, to love, and to trust. And so, under the vast desert sky, with the wind whispering through the rocks and sand, the cowboy and the Apache woman began their life together. Their bond was built on respect, courage, and understanding, a testament to the power of connection and the strength of the human heart. The desert, once harsh and intimidating, had become a place of life, love, and belonging. And in that vast, quiet land, they found not just survival, but a shared future, a home, and a story that would endure in the hearts of those who lived and loved with courage and respect.